I'm Don with the Law Office of Don R. Dennis Jr. My office helps businesses that are involved in complex business deals. The issue is this: when you sign an agreement, are there adequate protections to help you in the event things don't go as planned? And do you comprehensively understand all the terms in the agreement? As an engineer, experienced attorney, and certified privacy professional, I've seen all types of agreements. My office's motto is engage diligence, because I believe clients have the right to a responsive attorney that has the same energy for them from the beginning until the end. If you're looking for an attorney that's going to fight for you and not with you on your matter, contact my office at 213-455-0880.
Yes, you are watching the African Diaspora News channel. My name is Richard Sudan. Thank you very much as always for tuning in. Please show your appreciation by supporting the platform in the form of signing up to the website and spreading the word. Now, a very interesting story to bring you today out of the UK, and I'll get straight to the headline, which is from iNews, which I think is a subsidiary or part of the independent newspaper news group. The headline says, Britons are more likely to view Black Lives Matter as a force for good than not, according to data. Now, the headline is actually referring to Black Lives Matter, referring to the protests, particularly of football players taking the knee in support of black people and in a acknowledgement of the institutional racism and the victimization of black people at the hands of the system here in the UK. Now, this story for me is not really about Black Lives Matter, the organisation, or even just about the symbol of taking the knee. Because if we were to debate about the organisations in the UK and the US, Black Lives Matter, we would be here all day. Everyone's got an opinion. Everyone is opinionated. But the headline really didn't surprise me. And the article goes on to say that nearly half, 46% of voters saw the movement as a force for good, compared to 35% who saw it as negative, the YouGov survey suggested. Now, this story really reflects a couple of things. Two things really. It reflects the fact that we know that the system of racism is deadly. Racism is embedded into the heart of the institutions in the UK, and it's also reflected politically in that street movements and neo-fascists making noise in the street have created a tide of populism whereby the sort of racist street thugs can often sort of determine what becomes policy tomorrow. Now, I would argue that in the UK, racism is as bad as it's ever been in a number of decades. But the reality, I do think, is that we are talking about a minority of people, but it's a large minority. It's a large minority. So if you imagine in the UK a population of around 70 or so million, a large minority is still a hell of a lot of people. But the problem we've found here in the UK is that two things. A large minority is a hell of a lot of people, but a large minority, for a number of reasons, are often more loudly amplified than the sort of larger majority who really don't harbour these racist views. And this is the sort of situation we're facing, whereby, what's the phraseology? All it takes for evil to prevail is for good people to do nothing. And so what we have is a sort of large minority of people that are extremely unified in their anti-black prejudice and in their prejudice towards anybody who's not white. Now, what we saw at the recent England football games were, thousands of people were booing the players as they took the knee in a gesture of solidarity towards black people. But actually what you saw oftentimes was those jeers or those boos were actually being drowned out by, you know, people that were actually cheering and acknowledging the gesture. And so this is interesting. You know, I do think the tide is gradually turning, but the problem we have is while that tide is turning, you have a situation where those that want to desperately cling to their privilege, cling to the system of white supremacy, are not going to relinquish their power, because that's what racism really is. Racism is a system of power. It's not really somebody in the street calling someone names, although of course that's a symptom of it. Racism is really a system of power whereby a certain group of people are allowed to treat another group of people in a certain way, and they have the full force, the full bias of the system stacked in their favour. You see that reflected in racist policing, racism in education, racism in the so-called criminal justice system, employment, housing, healthcare, so on and so forth. But I think what you're going to gradually see, and maybe are starting to see among subsequent generations, is that as this system, this wicked system, is being challenged and is gradually being brought to its knees, even institutions like the royal family starting to lose their relevance, starting to be challenged on their historical and modern racism, but also how they treat family members like Meghan Markle. You're seeing more, particularly among younger people, more and more people sort of waking up to the reality of racism and to the reality of its effects. And so this poll in many ways doesn't really surprise me. And I think as time goes on, you're going to see more evidence that attitudes are gradually changing. But the problem, of course, is that, you know, power is never conceded because of goodwill. Power has to be taken. And so when you're talking about the power of racism and the beneficiaries of that system, you know, they're never going to give up their views and their benefiting from the system very easily. They're not going to go down without a fight. But views are gradually starting to change, and I think you're seeing the same thing in the United States. Of course, you know, I would argue the United Kingdom is overall a racist country. When we think about power and we think about the institutions in place and how that affects black people, the UK and the US are definitely racist countries in that sense. But it doesn't mean there aren't millions of people across both countries that are not racist, because quite obviously there are. And in many ways, that's why we're having so many of these conversations now about white supremacy, because so many people that have maybe had their head in the clouds are finally starting to wake up to the reality of the system. And in much the same way as you had the Brexit movement, if you like, here in the UK, which was pretty much a sort of anti-black movement, anti-immigrant movement, a sort of make Britain great white again kind of movement. Again, although the Brexit vote happened, it happened not necessarily because most people across the country actually wanted it. I mean, most people that voted wanted it, but then you've got whole questions about the voting system, then you've got the manipulation of data, and again, you've got the argument that you have a kind of a very large minority, but a large minority which were more amplified, more loud, more heard than the sort of larger majority. And I think you had the same sort of thing in the United States, although, you know, the situation is complex. But part of the reason for Trump's elevation was because of this kind of desire to make America white again. And it never was white. America's never been a white country. America is a country founded from settler colonialism. And again, you know, I think there's so many comparisons between the UK and the US. You know, these systems are being challenged right down to their foundations, their core, their founding ideologies. But, you know, I think in America, certainly, you know, white supremacists are never going to give up their guns. They're not going to give up their white supremacy, period. You know, you could have, and I mean this very respectfully, I respect all religions and all faiths. I'm just using a metaphor here. You know, you've got the United Nations, one of the most respected seats of power in the world, calling out the racism in the United States. You could have Jesus Christ himself, peace be upon him. You could have Jesus Christ come back and call out the United States racism but you would have people that call themselves Christians in the United States still not wanting to relinquish or let go of their racism. You know, the commitment that people have ideologically to a system of power that benefits them is a strong commitment. And so all we can really do is move carefully, move safely, move in a unified manner, and keep challenging and keep pushing these institutions, and also build our own apparatuses or apparatus of power amongst ourselves, build our own media, build our own political organizations, invest in our own communities ourselves. That's all we can do. But certainly, you know, these systems are definitely in their kind of final death knell, I think. I think in sort of decades in the future, however long it takes, I think people will look back at the Anglo-American Empire and they'll view it as one of the most shortest lived empires in human history, but maybe with sort of the biggest death tolls, both in terms of the effects of slavery, but also in terms of the wars of attrition, the wars of colonialism that the United States and the United Kingdom and their allies have undergone around the world, sort of murdering people to steal resources. It will be the shortest lived empire in history, but maybe with the biggest and most deadly body count. Who knows? But this headline nonetheless is very interesting. The headline reflects what I've suspected, which is that most people in the country are not racist, but that doesn't mean that millions of people are not racist. And all it takes is millions of people to be racist and to want the system to uphold for us to have a hell of a challenge on our hands. But there's a lot to be positive about, especially among the younger generations who, and again, you got racist amongst all generations, but as each generation is born, I think those attitudes are gradually being challenged and are sort of crumbling away. But this is going to be certainly a challenge for the rest of our lifetime. But this headline was very interesting. Britons are more likely to view Black Lives Matter as a force for good than ill, data shows. And I would imagine we'll see more polls like this as time goes on. But yeah, just a quick story I wanted to bring you. Thank you for tuning in. This is the African Diaspora News channel. Let us know what you think about the topic as always in the comments. Please like and subscribe and support the platform. Spread the word at this vital time. My name is Richard Sudan, and we will see you next time.
If you are over the age of 35, stop everything you're doing right now. After a lifetime of eating fatty foods, you may run the risks of a stroke or heart attack due to plaque buildup in your veins and arteries. To learn how you can reduce your risks, visit youthfountainlab.com or call 1-800-853-7856 today. This may be a life-changing call for you or someone you love. Thank you, and we hope to hear from you.
Thank you for watching, and make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out the African Diaspora News Channel app in the Google Play and Apple App Store.